Hi, and welcome to Science with Mrs. Stone from Advancing Science at Gettysburg College. Today we will do our Stream in a Bucket activity. This activity investigates the critters that live in a stream, and based upon the critters that live in the stream, we can assess the health of a stream. Have you ever visited a stream and looked at the critters that live there? What kinds of animals and plants might you find living in a stream? All sorts of things make their home in streams. More than just fish and crayfish and wading birds. Lots of organisms called macroinvertebrates live in the stream. Macroinvertebrates are organisms that are large enough to see with our eyes. That's why we call them macro. And invertebrates means that they are lacking a backbone. Macroinvertebrates can include a variety of organisms, such as crayfish, worms, snails, and even insects. Lots of insects start their life cycle living in a stream, and these insects are part of the larger group of critters called macroinvertebrates. Here we can see lots of different kinds of insects that we might find living in the stream. Now, most of these are not adult insects. Insects go through a process called metamorphosis, and that describes how their bodies change throughout their life cycle. There are two different kinds of metamorphosis that insects could go through. Some insects, like mayflies and praying mantises and crickets, go through what we call incomplete metamorphosis. There are 3 stages to this life cycle. We begin with eggs. From those eggs hatch what we call a nymph. This would be the juvenile form of the insect. The nymph will grow and molt or shed its skin several times on its way to becoming an adult. The adult, of course, will lay eggs to start the life cycle over again. The other type of metamorphosis is called complete metamorphosis, and this has 4 stages to this life cycle. We still begin with the egg, but then the critter that hatches from the egg, the juvenile, is called a larva. A larva is anything that's worm-like with legs. Think about a butterfly, for example. Butterflies go through complete metamorphosis, and you can picture what a caterpillar looks like. A caterpillar certainly looks worm-like with legs. The larva will eat and eat and eat until it is time to wrap itself up into its pupa, which you may also hear called a chrysalis or a cocoon. This is where the major change is happening, because the adult that emerges from the pupa doesn't look anything like the larva. So that's why we call this complete metamorphosis or complete change. The insect changes a lot in its appearance from its larval form, the juvenile form, to its adult form. Now, in the case of macroinvertebrates, or our critters that are living in the stream, what we usually find for the insect life cycle are either nymphs or larvae. So we find the juvenile part of the insect life cycle living in the stream. The adults that belong to these insects are usually found flying around the stream. To begin our activity today, you will need your copy of the Key to Macroinvertebrate Life in the River. This is a key that will help us figure out what kind of critters we have in our stream samples. As you watch the videos, make sure to look closely at the critters. Look for shells or no shells. Look to see if they have legs or no legs. If they have legs, count up to see how many they have. Look to see if they have any tails. If they have tails, how many? This key will help us figure out what kind of critters we have in the stream. So let's take a look at our first video. There's no sound during the video. Just look closely at the organism. Watch to see how it moves. Look for shells and legs and tails. Look at the ends of its body to see if it has any distinguishing characteristics like little tentacles. Our first video showed us this critter right here. Here's a screenshot of it. Let's look to see, does it have shells or no shells? No shells, good. Does it have legs
or no legs? No legs. Good. Does it have tentacles, brushes, or tails? Well, look at the ends of our critter. It looks to be little tentacles around the top. So now I can look at this section of critters, and I want to look and see if I can find the best match for what we saw in the last video. And as I look along at each of these critters, I want to look at the general shape of the body and find the one that best matches what we saw in the video. I think the best match is the cranefly larva. Do you agree? Cranefly larvae are what we call shredders, and they feed on leaves and twigs that fall into the stream. Their bodies are shaped the way they are because it helps them to burrow into leaves and the stream bottom. And then there is that fleshy ring of tentacles at the end. That last video, we had two critters, this one and this one. Let's start by identifying the one on the left. When we look closely at that, I do not see any shells, so we'll start on this side of our key. Now we're looking for legs or no legs. When I look at that critter, I see 3 legs on this side of its body. Now I can only see 2 legs on this side of its body, but I'm guessing that it probably has an even number of legs on both sides, so I think that this has 3 pairs of legs. And as we continue down, I do not see any wings, so I'm going to follow down no wings. And now I have choices about tails, either no tails, 1 or 2 tails, or 3 tails. And when I look at that critter right there, I do not see any tails. So I'm going to look in this section right here and find the one that best matches the body shape of the critter that you see on the left. Did you pick the dragonfly nymph? That's what I think too. Now let's take a look at the critter on the other side of our screen, on the right-hand side. Starting back at the top, shells or no shells? No shells. Legs or no legs? Well, I see 3 legs on this side and 3 legs on this side. So I'm going to come down this side of our chart, find the 3 pairs of legs. Now it's wings or no wings. I don't see any wings on that critter. So we'll come down the no wings side, and it's time to count tails again. Now this one, the tails are a little bit trickier, and if you could see this thing from the side, you would notice that it's actually over here. It's the damselfly larva. Dragonflies are predators. They will actually eat other macroinvertebrates that they find out in the stream. They have those large eyes to help them see prey. Here's our next critter. Starting back at the top, shells or no shells? No shells. Legs or no legs? Well, that guy has some legs. Come down through the center, and it's hard to tell on this one because he does have some little spikes along the side of his body, but if we look right here, this gives us 1, 2, 3 legs, and that would mean the other side of the body would have the same matching 3 legs, so this is going to be 3 pairs of legs. I do not see wings on this critter, so we'll come down the no wings side, and now we're along to tails. Either no tails, 1 or 2 tails, or 3 tails. And if I look right here on this guy, I can see the end of his tail. It looks like 2 tails, 1 and 2. So we'll come right down here into the center and see if you can find the best match for this critter. Did you say the Dobson fly or fish fly larva? I agree. Our next critter, we start back up at the top, shells or no shells? No shells. Legs or no legs? I don't see any legs on this one. Does it have tentacles, brushes, or tails? Or is it worm-like? I don't see any tentacles or tails. I think it's worm-like. Now take a look in this section here and see if you can find the best match. Did you think it was the leech? I agree. It's not the planaria. The planaria actually has a triangle-shaped head on it, so we would be able to distinguish that pretty easily. This one is a leech. Our next critter, shells or no shells? No shells. Legs or no legs? Legs. I see 1, 2, 3, 3 pair of legs right down here. Wings or no wings? I don't see any wings. Now let's count tails. 1, 2, 3. 3 tails are right over here. This one is part of the mayfly nymph group. There are a lot of different kinds of mayflies, just like there's lots of different kinds of dogs that all are dogs, but they look a little bit different. Same thing with the mayflies. They all have these 3 tails, but there may be other characteristics of their body that looks a little bit different depending on what species of mayfly. The mayfly, if you look closely along their abdomen, right down here, you often, especially if you're looking with a microscope, you can see these little structures that look like feathers. Those are actually gills. They use those gills to breathe. The mayflies come in lots of different shapes and sizes depending on how they move around. Swimming mayflies have a narrow body, like this one here. Crawling mayflies have a very flat body. And burrowing mayflies have large, strong legs. So you can think about how each of those different body adaptations may help the mayfly to be successful in its environment. This one looked a lot like that mayfly, very, very similar. We see 3 pairs of legs. We do not see any shells. We do not see any wings. Let's check out those tails. I see 1, 2 tails. 1, 2 tails. What do you think this one is? Did you say it was a stonefly nymph? I agree. The stonefly nymph that you may have seen in that video looked like it was doing push-ups, and when it does the push-ups, that helps to get more oxygen flowing over its body so that the gills can take that oxygen into the body. In that last video, we saw two different kinds of critters. They're similar, but one has a little house structure, like you see here, and the other just looks like a little worm. But if you look closely at that little worm, you will notice that there are actually legs on there. So it does have legs, does have 3 pairs of legs, and no wings. It's hard to tell if this one has tails, so we'll have to say it has no obvious tails. And this little one right here, it's also hard to tell if it had tails. This is where it's helpful to use a hand lens to be able to get a closer look. The ones with the case right here, those are caddisfly larvae that build a case just like you see here. And these worm-like ones right here, those are also a kind of caddisfly, but those ones do not build a case. We see one type over here with no obvious tails and another type over here with 1 or 2 tails. I got a closer look at this one. I do think it has 2 tails, so I think it's right over here. And these cases that the caddisfly builds, they build those around their body from materials that they find on the stream bottom. And those cases actually move along with them. Now that you've had a chance to practice using the key to identify stream macroinvertebrates, it's time to test your knowledge. The next video has 5 different kinds of critters. We've already seen 3 of these critters in previous videos. Watch the video carefully to observe whether or not the critters have shells, legs, tails, or any other identifying characteristics. Pause and rewind the video as needed to identify the 5 different critters using your key. A hint for you. There are 5 different types in the video, but there may be more than one of the same type of organism. One of the critters doesn't move much and is easy to miss, and we'll be sure to circle it in the video so that you don't miss it. When you're done watching the video, we'll take time to check your work. Are you ready to check your work? If not, pause and rewind the video. Otherwise, keep playing on to check your work. In our last video, we saw 5 different critters. We saw a crayfish, that's the large thing that looked kind of like a lobster. We saw a crane fly, we'd already seen those in our earlier videos, that worm-like critter with tentacles on one end. We saw a stonefly nymph, which has 2 tails, but it does look similar to the mayfly nymph. We can tell the difference between the two because the stonefly nymph has 2 tails and the mayfly nymph has 3 tails. We also saw a water penny. That was the small one. We tried to circle it in the video. It looks like a penny color and a penny shape. So those are the 5 things that we saw in the last video. Now let's tally up everything that we found in all the videos that we've seen as part of this lesson today. On the screen now you'll see 5 critters circled in red. Those are the ones that we saw in our last video, and then we circled some others in blue that represent some of the critters that we saw in earlier videos. Now that we've identified the different critters from our stream sample, we want to group them based upon their tolerance to water pollution. Group 1 organisms are called sensitive. They're sensitive to water pollution. They usually indicate good water quality. Group 2 organisms are somewhat sensitive. They can exist under a wide range of water quality conditions. And Group 3 organisms are tolerant of pollution. They usually indicate poor water quality. But what we like to see when we look at a stream sample is we like to see a good variety of organisms. Let's circle the ones that we found in our sample. Our next step is to transfer these to our data table that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. You should have a copy of the same data table. The group 1 organisms are in the top part, and they are in table number 1 up top here. Group 2 in the center, and they belong in the center data table, and group 3 at the bottom, our pollution tolerant, belong down here at the bottom. So let's start by tallying up our sensitive organisms. And what you will do is mark to see which ones were present in your sample.
Pause the video and take a few minutes to mark which organisms were present in your stream sample. Just go ahead and mark a check or an X in the present in stream column next to each of the organisms that we found for all 3 groups, the pollution sensitive, somewhat sensitive, and tolerant. Start the video back up after you've checked off which organisms were present in the stream.
Now that we have checked off what we have found in each of the different data tables, we need to do some calculations to give our stream a total index value. Our group 1 boxes are worth 3 points each. That's noted down here at the bottom. Our group 2 boxes are worth 2 points each, and our group 3 boxes are worth 1 point each. So if we count up how many boxes are checked for group 1, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes, and we multiply that times 3, since those are worth 3 points each. 4 times 3 equals, hopefully you said 12. In our group 2 boxes, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes checked, and there were 2 points each. 6 times 2. And lastly, down here at the bottom, our group 3 organisms, we only had 1 box checked, 1 times 1. And we tally everything up down here at the bottom, 12, 12, and 1. Total those up to get 25. And then we match that up with the word terms over here. Greater than 22 gives us an excellent quality stream. We saw lots of diversity in organisms in our stream, and so that was part of what helped contribute to that excellent score, was really the wide variety of organisms that we had seen. If we had only seen just these group 1 sensitive organisms, 1, 2, 3, 4 different kinds times 3 points each, that would only give us a score of 12. And if we look down here, that would be a fair quality stream. So it's important to have this wide variety of organisms to help us have a good quality stream. So next time you go to a stream, take some time to look a little bit more closely. Pick up those rocks. Look to see if there's any water pennies or mayflies crawling across those. Look in the middle of some of those leaf packs to find if there are some critters hiding in there, perhaps shredding those leaves or looking for prey.